there seem to be two groups of people. They're all scientists or engineers, highly qualified people in their own fields, but there seems to be the climatologists and everybody else, because your background is geology and marine geology, isn't it? It makes it very hard for the rest of us who aren't specialists to work out actually.
I understand that. I have great sympathy for the public and indeed for newspaper reporters and television reporters. You make a very important point, which is that there are extreme views on this issue, and if you want to reduce it to two extreme views, on the one hand you have what are called the deniers, people who deny that climate change happens at all. It's a very small group, and I don't know any that are really significant scientists. On the other hand, you have the alarmists, who say that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, it's our CO2 emissions that are the problem, and we need to do something about it. Now, both of these groups have shrill voices, and it's fair to say that the press has dominantly picked up the alarmist shrill view. The great majority of scientists sit in the middle. And I'm in New Zealand, as you know, giving a lecture tour, and I occupy the balanced middle of this debate. And the organisation that's supporting me, the New Zealand Climate Science Coalition, has as one of its aims informing the public of the real facts, the balanced facts on climate change. Let me give you an example of the balanced view on one of the big contentious issues. The big issue is that carbon dioxide of human origin is causing dangerous global warming. Now, no scientist on either side of this debate doubts that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. It's a minor greenhouse gas. Water vapour is by far the biggest, but it is a greenhouse gas and it causes a small amount of warming. And we are adding to the atmosphere. Now, if you calculate, and this is not a disputed figure, both the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations body, and independent physicists agree that if you double the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from pre-industrial times, then the amount of warming will be about a degree. Now, we've already put in an extra 30% roughly over what was there in pre-industrial time. And because of the nature of the relationship between the increasing carbon dioxide and the increasing temperature, we actually already have had 75% of that 1 degree warming. So we've got a few tenths of a degree to go. Now, that is trivial in the context of the climate system, but the green organisations, rightly in the 1980s, identified possibly humans having an effect on global warming as being something we should look at. So we should. It's estimated that Western countries have now spent, since 1990, more than $50 billion trying to identify the human signal in the climate system. And I think if they'd identified it, you would by now have heard about it. Every scientist understands that humans have an effect on climate. That's not a disputed issue. We're in Auckland today. 150 years ago, this was mangrove swamps and shrubby grassland and trees. We've now replaced that natural vegetation with concrete, steel, grass and macadam. That traps the sun's rays during the day, re-radiates them overnight, and it produces warming. So on average, every major city in the world, indeed even quite small towns, are now warmer, if you put a measuring station there, than they were before the development of the city. That's called the urban heat island effect. Well understood, everybody knows about it. Equally, if we go out to our friends in the countryside, the farmers, when they cut down the native bush and replace it with wheat or some other light-coloured crop, that area of countryside now reflects more of the sun's rays than before. That actually causes local cooling. So nobody doubts that man has an effect on local climate, and some areas the effect is cooling, some areas the effect is warming. It's a no-brainer, as the Americans say, that if you add all those local effects all over the world, there must be a global human signal. Nobody doubts that. The question is, can we identify it, and is it dangerous? We don't even know whether the net global signal is warming or cooling. Now, most scientists would say, and they'd give good reasons for it, we actually think it's warming. But that's their opinion. If we're talking about demonstrated facts, science, we actually don't know worldwide what the signal is because we can't measure it.
Here in New Zealand, we've been very early adopters of the whole Kyoto Protocol thing. I'm getting the impression that maybe we haven't looked before we leapt.
Well, the Kyoto Protocol and indeed the emissions trading bill that's before Parliament at the moment, for all the good they will do, you might as well stand under the shower and tear up $100 notes. They will have no measurable impact on future climate whatsoever.
But we're spending billions.
But that's because it makes people feel good. This is a feel-good thing. If you're talking about the health of the economy, then looked at from overseas, New Zealand is looked at with complete mystification. I think I'm right in saying you're the only country that under the Kyoto Protocol has accepted an obligation for methane emissions from your agricultural animals. And people overseas just look at this and they can't get their mind around it. Methane, world atmospheric content of methane, has been decreasing for about the last 10 years. No scientist knows why. Lots of scientists can talk to you about ifs and buts, but nobody actually knows why. So in this context, the idea that you'd revolutionise New Zealand's economy around trying to decrease ruminant emissions is, well, I won't use an impolite word.
But because New Zealand has a reputation for being clean and green, I think we're seeing it, or the government is seeing it, as we are being good stewards of the beautiful environment that we've been given, and that we're not polluting it anymore. Surely that's a good thing.
Oh, marketing a clean and green image is a very good thing, and much more to the point, everybody agrees that we want to look after the planetary environment, both for our own benefit and for our children. So again, that's not an issue. The issue is, what is the best way of protecting the standard of living, which includes the environment, and the wealth of New Zealanders and New Zealand descendants? Now, I cannot think of a more damaging attack on that than the emissions trading scheme bill. It is certain to increase the cost of electricity, perhaps to more than double it. So I can't understand why government is insistent on a policy which everybody knows is going to damage the economy and is going to be regressive in the sense it will hurt the poorer people the most.
So what would be your advice to ordinary people like us who aren't scientists, who are trying to find the truth?
There is such intimidation of scientists in universities and research organisations on this issue, intimidation against them speaking out because it's politically incorrect, that nobody knows what the majority of scientists thinks. Nobody has the faintest idea what the consensus is. In my contacts with day-to-day scientists, I would estimate, and this is my view, I can't prove it, I would estimate well over half the scientists I deal with think that we should think about whether humanity is having an effect on the climate, but that at the moment we cannot show that effect is above the level of the noise in the natural climate system. Ironically, there's all this public hysteria about global warming, which completely misses the point that the most dangerous sort of climate change is cooling. It happens that right at the moment the sun is in the part of its cycle that some reputable solar physicists are predicting we're probably heading for 2 decades or more of cooling. Possibly even as much as was true of the little ice age in Europe during the 14th through 19th centuries. If that happens, it will have a terrifically negative effect on food supply. And if you've been reading the newspapers lately, you would understand that because some bright fellow had the idea we should put corn in our petrol tank, we've already got a crisis with the food supply. So how should we deal with this? We should adapt to climate change as it happens. We don't try and stop volcanic eruptions, we don't try and stop earthquakes, we don't try and stop storms, we don't try and stop tsunami, because we know they're natural hazards that we can neither predict nor control. Climate change is exactly the same, with the single difference that it tends to happen over a slightly longer time. But our response should be the same. We should adapt to it, and we should help the people who, through no fault of their own, are particularly badly damaged when we have a downturn, a cooling or a warming.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I hope this evening goes well.
Thank you very much.